On my 18th birthday, my adoptive parents smiled, then told me why they really took me in. They said, "We've been waiting 3 years for your body." My adoptive parents waited 3 years to harvest my womb for their real daughter, so I left them with empty cribs instead. In my family, I was taught that 18 meant freedom, but for me, it meant my parents finally revealing they'd been waiting 3 years to harvest my womb for their real daughter. The Whitmans chose me from foster care when I was 15. After bouncing between 12 different homes, their mansion felt like stepping into a fairy tale. They had a daughter named Eliza, who was 24, and glowing with the kind of beauty that came from never wondering where your next meal would come from. She had everything except the ability to have children, though I wouldn't learn that for 3 more years. They gave me a bedroom with lavender walls because I'd mentioned once that it was my favorite color. That first night, Mrs. Whitman found me crying on the floor, terrified I'd wake up back in the group home. She held me, whispering that I was home now, really home. I believed her. For 3 years, I had everything. Private school, where kids complained about the wrong color Mercedes, violin lessons with a teacher who said I had natural talent, family vacations to Italy and Hawaii. They called me their daughter and bought me prom dresses and cheered at my school plays. Noah was the only person who knew about my past. We'd been together 2 years, and he was the first person who made me feel like I deserved good things. He promised we'd build something beautiful together, something that was ours. My 18th birthday started with French toast and fresh strawberries, Mom decorating the whole kitchen with streamers, while Dad gave me a jewelry box that played Chopin. That night, they took me to Le Nardin, the kind of restaurant where water comes in crystal glasses and the waiter explains each fork. I was laughing at Dad's terrible joke about escargot when Mom set down her wine glass with a delicate clink and exchanged a look with Eliza that made my stomach turn. "Now that you're 18, Mom began, her voice suddenly businesslike, "we need to discuss your purpose in this family." Purpose? The word slithered across the white tablecloth toward me. Dad pulled out a leather folder, the expensive kind he used for his real estate deals, and slid papers across to me. Medical documents, fertility test results, genetic compatibility charts, all with my name, all dated over the past 3 years. Every doctor's appointment they'd said was for my health. Every blood test they'd said was routine. It had all been for this. "We chose you specifically," Dad said, like he was explaining a business merger. "Eliza needs a surrogate. Someone young, healthy, genetically compatible. You're perfect." Eliza leaned forward, and for the first time, I saw the desperation she'd been hiding. Her voice shook as she explained. I would live with her during the pregnancies, multiple pregnancies, at least 3 children. I would follow strict dietary protocols, exercise regimens, take prenatal vitamins they'd already purchased, sign papers saying the children were never mine, never tell them I carried them. After I finished giving her babies, they'd generously allow me to attend whatever college I had in mind. The restaurant sounds faded until all I could hear was my heartbeat, and Eliza saying, "I've been waiting 3 years for you to be ready." "Think of everything we've given you," Mom said when I couldn't speak. "The life you'd have without us. Foster kids like you don't get opportunities like this. We saved you from the streets." Dad's voice turned sharp as the steak knife beside my untouched plate. "The college fund, the car we promised, your whole future. It all depends on your cooperation." I made it to my lavender bedroom before I vomited. 3 years of French toast mornings and forehead kisses had been preparation. They hadn't saved me. They'd been fattening me up for slaughter. Noah found me on my bathroom floor at midnight, still in my birthday dress. He held me while I told him everything, promising we'd figure it out together. A week later, at Sunday dinner, I watched Mom pass the mashed potatoes and made my move. "Noah and I are getting married. We want to start our own family right away. I can't be Eliza's surrogate if I'm trying to have my own babies." The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked 5 times before anyone moved. Then Mom's voice could have frozen blood. "Then you're cut off. Everything, now." She grabbed my phone from the table and powered it off with one manicured finger. Dad held out his palm for my car keys. "You have 1 week to reconsider or get out." Eliza exploded from her chair, her perfect composure shattering like the wine glass she knocked over. "I've waited 3 years for your body. 3 years of watching you grow up, knowing you'd save me." Red wine spread across the white tablecloth like blood. I nodded, pretending to reconsider, while my survival instincts screamed. The next day, I took 3 buses to Planned Parenthood, clutching cash from my violin case just in case they tried to force me. While pretending to pack slowly, I found a box in the attic that made my blood freeze. Files on 3 other foster girls who'd lived in my room before me. Michelle, incompatible after further testing. Sarah, ran away. Jessica, unsuitable temperament. All had escaped before their 18th birthdays. I was the first who stayed. That night, I slipped out the window. I used to stare at stars from a backpack holding everything that mattered. My feet hit the manicured grass and I ran. I thought I was free until I got to Noah's apartment and found a check on his counter for $50,000 and a single line for delivering her to us on schedule. His signature was at the bottom of the delivery confirmation. 3 years of love letters suddenly made sense. 3 years of him being the only one who understood. I turned to leave, but Noah was already standing in his doorway, blocking my only exit. "They're on their way," he said softly. Car headlights swept across the apartment parking lot, illuminating Noah's face for a moment. His hands shook as he gripped the doorframe, blocking my only escape route. The backpack straps cut into my shoulders as I took a step backward, my mind racing through options that didn't exist. "They paid you to love me." The words came out as a whisper, but they hit him like a physical blow. His guilty silence stretched between us. 3 years of manufactured affection crumbling in the space of a heartbeat. I feinted left, then dove right, trying to slip past him. His hand shot out, grabbing my backpack strap and yanking me backward. I stumbled, nearly falling, and he used the momentum to pull me closer. You were the easiest mark I ever had, he said, his voice hollow. Foster kid. Desperate for love. The Whitmans knew exactly what they were looking for. Mrs. Whitman's voice echoed up the stairwell, sharp and commanding. Noah, do you have her? My violin case hung across my body, the hard edges pressing against my ribs. Without thinking, I swung it forward, striking Noah's knee with all the force I could manage. He cried out, his grip loosening as he stumbled sideways. The instrument that had symbolized my new life, my escape into something beautiful, had become my weapon. I bolted past him, racing toward the back stairs. His shouts followed me, giving the Whitmans directions about the building's layout, the exits where I might run. The alley behind the building stretched out before me, narrow and grimy. Dad Whitman's Mercedes blocked one end, its headlights creating harsh shadows against the brick walls. At the other end, Eliza sat in her white BMW, engine running. They'd coordinated this, planned for every escape route. A dumpster sat against the building wall, its lid closed. I scrambled onto it, sneakers slipping on the slick metal surface. My fingers found the bottom rung of the fire escape ladder, rust flaking off under my grip. She's climbing. Eliza's scream pierced the night air. Her designer heels clicked against the asphalt as she got out of her car, the sound echoing off the alley walls. I pulled myself up, muscles burning from the effort. The metal groaned under my weight, but held. From the second-floor landing, I could see them all converging below. The Whitmans and their expensive clothes looked absurd in this grimy alley, like mannequins that had wandered out of a department store window. Mrs. Whitman stepped forward, her voice taking on that trembling quality she used when she wanted to appear vulnerable. Sweetheart, you're confused. We only want to talk. Come down and we can work this out. Dad Whitman stood beside her, his phone in his hand, thumb moving rapidly across the screen, calling for backup maybe, or activating some plan they'd prepared for this moment. The fire escape connected to several apartment windows. Most had bars or were painted shut, but one on the second floor sat slightly open, a gap just wide enough. I pressed my face against the glass, seeing an elderly woman inside watching television. I pushed the window wider and slipped through, my backpack catching on the frame for a terrifying moment before I yanked it free. The woman's coffee mug crashed to the floor, ceramic shards scattering across the linoleum. She stared at me, hand moving toward the phone on her side table. Through the window, I watched the Whitmans argue in the alley. Mom's perfect composure cracked as she gestured wildly at Dad, their voices carrying up words indistinct. The elderly woman, Doris, according to the nameplate by her door, studied me with sharp eyes. She recognized me from the neighborhood, had seen me coming and going from Noah's building. When she offered to call the police, I found myself begging her not to, words tumbling out about foster care and surrogacy and 3 years of lies. She listened without interrupting, then handed me her phone. I needed to check my email to see if there was anything I'd missed. 3 years of messages from Noah loaded on the screen, and reading them now was like decoding a predator's playbook. Every sweet message, every declaration of love had been carefully crafted. Can't wait to meet the girl who deserves real love. You're so special, so different from anyone I've known. The manipulation was surgical in its precision. The Whitmans' voices drifted up from the hallway. They were going door to door, their story already prepared. Our daughter is having a mental health crisis. She's confused. Off her medication. We're so worried about her. My phone, the one Mom had taken, buzzed somewhere. They must have turned it back on. Emma, my best friend from school, would be texting, worried about the cryptic message I'd sent her before leaving. She thought she was texting me, but Noah would see it all now. Your mom called saying you ran away. Are you okay? Doris disappeared into her bedroom and returned with an armful of clothes. These were my daughters, she said quietly. She passed me 2 years ago. The clothes still smell like lavender. She loved that scent. The coincidence made my skin crawl, but I pulled on the oversized hoodie anyway. Doris mentioned she'd been a social worker for 30 years, had seen this before. Foster kids who became prey, families who took them in for all the wrong reasons. Using Doris's ancient desktop computer, I logged into my cloud storage. The screenshots I had taken of the other foster girls' files were still there. I downloaded them quickly, saving copies to a flash drive Doris provided. The Whitmans might be able to wipe my phone remotely, but they couldn't touch these. A knock rattled Doris's door. Noah's voice pitched to sound concerned and reasonable. Mrs. Chen, have you seen a teenage girl? Brown hair, about this tall. She's sick and needs her medication. Her family's very worried. He knew which apartment. Of course he did. He'd probably watched me climb through the window. Guided them here. Doris moved to the door with surprising grace for her age while I slipped into her bedroom closet. The smell of mothballs and old perfume surrounded me. Haven't seen anyone? Doris lied smoothly. She's confused, Noah continued. Offer meds. Please call this number immediately if you see her. She could hurt herself. His footsteps retreated reluctantly. Through the thin walls, I heard him knock on the next door, repeating the same lies. Doris returned to the living room, muttering under her breath. Foster kids know predators. They can smell them a mile away. That boy reeks of it. She positioned herself by the window, giving me updates on the Whitmans' movements. They'd regrouped by their cars, Eliza gesticulating wildly. Even from here, I could read her body language. 3 years wasted. 3 years of waiting for nothing. The violin teacher, Ms. Petrova, lived 6 blocks away. She'd always said if I ever needed anything, her door was open. She'd noticed things over the years, bruises that weren't there, the way I sometimes flinched when someone moved too quickly. She never pushed, but she noticed. Before leaving, I gave Doris the flash drive with all the evidence. She promised to make copies to keep them safe, just in case. Her hands were steady as she took it, the hands of someone who'd protected children her whole career. Wait 10 minutes, she advised. They'll circle back to the front of the building, go out through the basement, exit through the laundry room. I pulled the hoodie hood up, tucking my hair inside in the mirror by Doris's door. I looked like a different person, older, tired, like someone who'd learned the world's harsh lessons too young. The basement smelled of detergent and mildew. I navigated between washing machines, my footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. The exit opened onto a side street away from where the Whitmans waited. 6 blocks stretched before me like an eternity. Every car could be them. Every shadow could be Noah. But I kept walking, one foot in front of the other, the way I'd learned to survive in 12 different foster homes. The night air bit at my exposed skin, but I didn't slow down. Behind me, somewhere in that alley, the Whitmans were realizing their perfect plan had failed. Their chosen surrogate, their 3-year investment, had slipped through their manicured fingers. But I knew this was just the beginning. They wouldn't give up easily. 3 years of planning, 3 years of careful grooming, didn't end with one failed capture. For now, though, I had 6 blocks of freedom and a violin teacher who might believe an impossible story. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd had an hour ago when I'd stood frozen in Noah's doorway, watching my world collapse. The lavender scent from Doris's daughter's clothes followed me through the empty streets, a ghost of someone else's life wrapped around my shoulders. I wondered if she'd known somehow that her clothes would one day help another girl escape. If she'd understand why her mother had kept them, waiting for someone who needed them. 5 blocks, 4, 3. My legs burned, but I didn't stop. Somewhere behind me, the Whitmans were probably expanding their search, calling in favors, activating whatever network they'd use to find and pay Noah. 2 blocks, 1. Ms. Petrova's building rose before me, ordinary and safe. I pressed her buzzer with shaking fingers, praying she was home, praying she'd answer, praying she'd believe me when I told her why I was really here. Ms. Petrova's voice crackled through the intercom, groggy but alert. I explained it was me, that I needed help, and the buzzer sounded immediately. Her apartment door opened before I reached it, and she pulled me inside without questions. Her face hardened as I explained everything, the words pouring out in a desperate rush. She nodded at certain points, her expression growing darker. When I finished, she revealed something that made my stomach drop. She'd been uncomfortable with how the Whitmans discussed my purpose in their family during recitals. The way they'd insisted on private lessons, always wanting updates on my progress, had triggered old instincts from her childhood in Eastern Europe. I borrowed her phone to text Emma a cryptic message begging her to come to Ms. Petrova's address. While waiting, I wrote everything down in one of Petrova's notebooks, getting the details on paper while they were fresh. Emma arrived within 30 minutes, initially skeptical about my story until I showed her the screenshots of the other foster girls' files. Her face went pale when she recognized one of the names. She remembered seeing Michelle at the mall with the Whitmans years ago, remembered thinking how sad the girl looked despite the shopping bags. The memory had stuck with her because Michelle disappeared from social media shortly after, and Emma had always wondered what happened. The Whitmans escalated their search quickly. Within hours, they'd posted on the neighborhood Facebook groups about their troubled daughter who needed medication. My school photo stared back at us from Emma's phone screen as comments poured in with supposed sightings. People who'd never met me claimed they'd seen me acting erratically at the grocery store, the park, the library. Emma recorded my testimony on her phone while Ms. Petrova called a police friend off the record. The officer listened but explained that without immediate danger or proof of a crime, it remained a family matter. Adult children left home all the time. The surrogacy discussion, while disturbing, wasn't illegal if no force was involved. Emma created a fake social media account to monitor the Whitmans' posts and gather intelligence. Through it, we discovered Eliza had been active in fertility forums for 5 years, discussing alternative surrogacy arrangements. Some of her posts made my skin crawl. She'd researched international adoption loopholes, fertility tourism, and had even posted about the ideal age for surrogates. Ms. Rodriguez, my old foster care caseworker, answered on the third ring. When I explained the situation, her silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she revealed she'd had concerns about the Whitman adoption but couldn't prove anything. Her supervisor had dismissed her worries as bias against wealthy families. The Whitmans escalated further, calling my school to report a psychiatric emergency. They claimed I needed immediate intervention, painting a picture of a disturbed girl who'd misunderstood a generous offer to help with college expenses. The school, bound by privacy laws, couldn't confirm or deny my enrollment status to concerned callers. Ms. Rodriguez's revelation hit like a punch to the gut. I was the 4th girl in this pattern. 3 before me, same age range, same foster care background, same sudden departures. She had tried to flag it, but the Whitmans' sterling reputation and generous donations to foster care charities had silenced any questions. Noah started texting my old phone, which the Whitmans had reactivated. Emma showed me the messages on her fake account where someone had screenshot and shared them. He claimed he loved me, that the money meant nothing, that we could work things out. Each text made Emma angrier until she threw her phone across Ms. Petrova's couch in disgust. I asked Rodriguez about contacting the other foster girls. 2 had aged out and left the state immediately after turning 18. Their forwarding addresses led nowhere. The 3rd girl's whereabouts remained unknown. She'd simply vanished from the system. But Rodriguez remembered their names, remembered their faces, remembered her growing unease with each placement. The Whitmans appeared at Emma's house next, forcing her parents into an awkward conversation. They spun a tale of mental health concerns and medication non-compliance. But Emma's parents noticed inconsistencies in their story. When pressed for specifics about my supposed condition, the Whitmans fumbled, their prepared script failing under scrutiny. Rodriguez dug deeper into her old files, discovering she'd noted concerns about the Whitmans' foster license renewal timeline. Each girl had been placed with them just as the previous one aged out, a pattern too perfect to be coincidence. Her supervisor had dismissed it as efficient placement, praising the Whitmans for always having room for another child in need. Emma's parents grew suspicious enough to ask the Whitmans to leave. The shift in their demeanor was immediate. Mrs. Whitman's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold underneath. Emma's father, a mild-mannered accountant, stood firm at his doorway until they retreated to their Mercedes. My search for the third foster girl yielded unexpected results. Jessica, now 22, maintained a small social media presence 3 towns over. Her profile bio simply read, "Survivor." Her posts focused on trauma recovery and rebuilding life after abuse. My hands shook as I typed a message, explaining who I was and why I was reaching out. Ms. Petrova offered her couch indefinitely, framing it as one artist supporting another. She'd fled her own country to escape people who tried to control her, and she recognized the same desperation in my eyes. Her apartment became my safe house. Her elderly neighbors became my early warning system against the Whitman's searches. Jessica responded within minutes. Her message was simple and direct. She'd known they'd try again. Had been waiting for this call. We arranged a video chat, and her story filled in horrifying gaps. Eliza had already been practicing pregnancy symptoms when Jessica lived there, wearing a fake belly around the house, decorating nurseries that would never hold babies. Rather than continuing to hide, I decided to take control of the narrative. Emma helped me draft my own social media post, carefully worded to avoid legal issues while sharing my truth. We included just enough detail to be believed without making accusations that could backfire. Jessica revealed more during our call. She'd discovered Eliza's obsession went deeper than anyone imagined. Eliza had baby clothes hidden in her closet, had picked out names, had even practiced breastfeeding techniques with dolls. The desperation wasn't new. It had been building for years before they started taking in foster girls. Parents at my school began questioning the Whitman story after my friends defended my character online. Teachers who'd known me for 3 years posted about my academic achievements, my volunteer work, my complete lack of mental health issues. The narrative the Whitmans tried to construct started crumbling under the weight of contradicting evidence. The perfect Whitman reputation cracked as neighbors began sharing their observations. Several mentioned never seeing baby photos of the adopted daughters, how the Whitmans always changed the subject when asked about their girls' younger years. Small oddities that had seemed like quirks now appeared sinister in hindsight. Rodriguez connected me with a pro bono family lawyer who confirmed my legal rights as an adult. The Whitmans had no legal authority over me, couldn't force me to return, couldn't access my medical records without consent. The lawyer advised documenting everything and avoiding any direct contact that could be construed as harassment. The Whitmans made a critical mistake at the grocery store. Mrs. Whitman encountered a neighbor who asked about me, and her careful mask finally shattered completely. She called me an ungrateful brat who'd been given everything, her voice rising until other shoppers turned to stare. Someone recorded the outburst, posting it with a caption questioning if this was really the loving mother searching for her sick daughter. The video spread through local social media groups within hours. The contrast between Mrs. Whitman's public persona and her venomous rage was jarring. Comments poured in from people reconsidering their assumptions about the situation. Some shared their own observations about the family's strange dynamics over the years. Noah appeared at Ms. Petrova's building, but the neighbors had formed an informal network. Mrs. Chen from the second floor called up immediately, warning that he was in the lobby. Mr. Arsha from across the hall positioned himself by his peephole, ready to intervene if needed. The legal evidence Jessica provided revealed the final piece of the puzzle. She'd overheard the Whitmans arguing about the Sarah problem before she escaped. Sarah had apparently discovered their plans too early and had tried to warn authorities, but no one believed a foster kid over respected community members. Her disappearance from the system suddenly made terrible sense. I made a decision that would define everything that followed. No more girls would end up in lavender bedrooms, groomed for years, only to discover their purpose on their 18th birthday. The Whitmans' ability to foster would end with me. Whatever it took to accomplish that, Emma's parents joined 3 other school families in publicly supporting me. They shared their own observations about the Whitmans' controlling behavior at school events, how they'd monitored my friendships, insisted on knowing where I was at all times. Details that had seemed like overprotective parenting now revealed a more sinister pattern. The Whitmans attempted damage control, claiming I'd misunderstood their generous surrogacy offer, but their story kept changing. First, I was mentally ill. Then I was ungrateful. Then I was confused about a simple conversation. The inconsistencies made more people question what was really happening. The Whitmans escalated further by trying to manipulate social media. The violin teacher community rallied next. Several teachers came forward about Eliza's invasive questions regarding their young students, and particularly those from difficult backgrounds. She'd asked about home situations, family support systems, which students might need extra help. Everyone had assumed she was being charitable. My story spread through private parenting groups as a cautionary tale. Parents shared their own experiences with families who'd seemed too good to be true, adoption stories that had ended badly, the importance of listening when children tried to tell them something was wrong. Jessica produced the most damning evidence yet, canceled checks she'd photographed before escaping. Regular $50,000 payments to R. Mitchell, matching Noah's timeline perfectly. The Whitmans had found him the same way they'd found us, targeting someone desperate enough to play their game. Eliza's response to mounting pressure was a tearful video about her fertility journey. She spoke about the pain of being unable to have children, the dreams of motherhood that haunted her. But instead of generating sympathy, the comment section exploded with disgust. People recognized manipulation when they saw it, especially when she never once acknowledged the girl she'd tried to use. Mr. Whitman's real estate partners began distancing themselves as the scandal affected his business reputation. Deals fell through as clients questioned his ethics. The country club crowd that had once embraced them now whispered behind their backs. Social death in their circles was swift and merciless. Jessica, Sarah, and I met for dinner at a small restaurant downtown. No fancy water glasses or multiple forks, just three survivors planning how to protect others. We talked about starting a support network, sharing our stories with foster care organizations, making sure caseworkers knew the warning signs. Rodriguez sent word that the Whitman's foster care license had been permanently revoked. Multiple states had flagged their file. They'd never be allowed near vulnerable children again. It wasn't justice in the legal sense, but it was protection for future victims. The violin I'd left behind was returned to me by one of the Whitman's former housekeepers. She'd saved it when they tried to throw it away, knowing it meant something to me. I held it for a long time, remembering the girl who'd believed she'd found a fairy tale family. 6 months later, I stood on a small stage at a community center, tuning that same violin. The benefit concert for foster youth had been Jessica's idea. We'd raised enough to fund emergency housing for kids aging out of the system, for those who needed somewhere safe to run. The audience wasn't huge, maybe 50 people, but they were the ones who mattered. Ms. Petrova sat in the front row, pride evident on her weathered face. Emma and her parents were there, the family who'd stood up to the Whitmans when it mattered. Doris had brought her whole building, the neighbors who'd formed a protective wall around me. Sarah and Jessica flanked the stage, our chosen sisterhood forged in survival. We'd found each other, not through the family the Whitmans had pretended to offer, but through the truth of what they'd tried to take from us. As I raised my bow, I caught sight of a young girl in the audience, maybe 15, wearing a group home ID bracelet. She watched with a weary hope I recognized from my own reflection at that age. This concert was for her, for all the girls who needed to know that fairy tales weren't real, but survival was. The first notes filled the space. Not perfect, but honest. Somewhere across town, the Whitmans were packing up the remnants of their carefully constructed life. Eliza's womb would remain as empty as the lavender bedroom they'd used as bait. But here in this room, with these people, something real was being built. Music swelled, and I played not for the family that had tried to own me, but for the community that had chosen to see me. Justice hadn't come through courts or police or systems that had failed us before. It had come through the fierce protection of ordinary people who'd finally decided that some things mattered more than reputation or comfort. As the last note faded, I lowered my violin and looked at the audience. The girl with the group home bracelet was crying, but she was also smiling. She saw what I'd needed to see at her age, that there was life after the fairy tale ended, that real families were chosen, not assigned, that survival could become something more. The Whitmans had waited 3 years to harvest my womb. Instead, they'd harvested a community of survivors who would ensure no other girl would stand in a lavender bedroom believing she'd finally found home, only to discover she'd been livestock all along. They'd created their own downfall by underestimating the power of foster kids who'd learned to recognize predators and the communities brave enough to believe.